Now, I'm really pleased to introduce our guest, Anita. Anita's going to talk to us about the Hague Convention, what it is, and why it doesn't work for mothers. So, Anita, over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much Vicky and Heather and everyone for helping me to organise this. I'm really delighted to be with you today to talk about the non-profit Hague Explained, a community interest company that I co-founded a couple of years ago. I to explain to you why we founded it, why it's necessary, and what we do, why I think it's important that you know a little bit about what we do. So I'm going to start with a very brief case study. It's based on the research that I did for my master's on women and child abuse, and I did some research into the Hague Convention, worked with 6 amazing mothers to get some information from their stories. So I'll explain, after telling you about the case study, I'll explain a little bit about what the Hague Convention on the International Abduction of Children is, also known as the Hague Abduction Convention. It's where we take our name, Hague Explained. I'll tell you about its history, how it's used today, what the issues around it are, and I'll also give you another case study to think about, an imaginary one this time, not a real one, and tell you what we're doing to try and mitigate the trauma that this convention causes to international families. We'll then have some time for questions, and I'd like to go on after that by telling you about some of the other mothers who were involved in my research and what I worked out has helped them a little bit. And there'll be a few more minutes at the end for any more questions you might have. And I'll tell you how to contact us if you'd like more information as well, and give you some ideas of the sort of things that you could perhaps do if you wanted to get involved in helping. So let me just share my screen to start with. So this is us, and there is a QR code down there, but it might be hidden by some of the pictures of the videos, but I will share it to you again later if you'd like to access our website. And what I'm going to do is give you a genuine case study, one of the mothers who was involved in my research, then the outline, an imaginary case study, a little bit about our work, and the question and answer session. Then I'll tell you more about the Hague Convention, which is the gift that keeps on giving, lifelong trauma for everyone involved, what can help, more case studies, and some more questions. So let's see if we can go. Right. The first case study I'd like to tell you about is Sophie. She's actually a good friend of mine from a Scandinavian family. So this is what I wrote about Sophie in my dissertation, the summary of her case. I'll read it to you. Before her divorce from their abusive father, Sophie lived on a different continent with her children. She was awarded sole custody of her children and assured by various lawyers that this included the right to take them back to live in the family's home country. She was pregnant with her new partner's baby, so she moved home and gave birth to her youngest child soon after her arrival. Unfortunately, her ex-husband then used the Hague Convention to get their children, the 3 older children, returned to the country he was living in, where they'd been living until fairly recently. The youngest child, after a few months, managed to return to Sophie and completed her secondary and tertiary education. But Sophie has not seen one of her children now for several years and has only had very occasional contact with her eldest child. So as you can see, the Hague Convention leads to mothers and children losing their lives together. They lose each other in their lives. Are you shocked? Yes, people usually are. Is this common? No, not really. It's not particularly common. Around the world, there are approximately around 3,000 cases in the world. So that's a tiny, tiny amount of families. UK is the second or third largest country for Hague cases with about 200 to 300 a year. It is a tiny number, but the trauma that it causes each family is lifelong. And it can, we believe, largely be prevented just by raising awareness. If you know about it, you're less likely to fall into the trap of being a victim, survivor of such a case. Forewarned is forearmed. So that's what we are working towards. Right, let me move on to tell you a little bit about, sorry, I seem to have jumped. There we go. To give you an outline of the Hague Convention. Its official name is the 1980 Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Parental Child Abduction, known for short as the Hague Abduction Convention. At the moment, there are about 103 states that have signed as signatories to the convention. To give you a little background, it was first drafted in the 1970s. So some of you might remember the 70s. I have memories of it. And it was first signed in October 1980. The world's a pretty different place today. We'll look at some of the issues around what has changed. The aim of the convention, the aims were great. They were really good aims to have in the late 1970s. They wanted prompt return of children who were taken to another country. The idea in the 70s was that nice ladies, women here in the UK perhaps, or in Germany or Switzerland or Spain, might meet and fall in love with a foreign gentleman. Now, marriage is irrelevant in a Hague Convention case, as is nationality. So let's just assume this foreign gentleman might come from Italy, or from Peru, or from Australia, any of these countries. And the idea was that this man might at some point decide to take the children back to his home country. Perhaps the relationship was breaking down and he thought he'd have a better chance in his own country of getting custody of the children. That's known as jurisdiction shopping. So the Hague Convention aimed to stop that. He might want to punish the mother by removing the children. Again, the Hague Convention would prevent that. And it would prevent trauma to the children because they would be brought home to their place of habitual residence really quickly, ideally within 6 weeks. And here in the UK, we're really proud of the record of the number of cases where there is a resolution within 6 weeks. It's a great record to have. The children are sent back really, really quickly. You might be thinking, this all sounds very good. And it did in the 70s and in 1980. Today, there are a few issues with it. First of all, this habitual residence, which is what these cases hang on, where is the child's habitual residence? It's not defined in law. So it's open to interpretation. It's interpreted in different ways in different countries. Some countries, such as Australia, for example, say that you're habitually resident if you plan to move and you step foot on Australian soil. You're suddenly habitually resident. In other places, it takes 6 months to a year, so it really depends on where you are. Something else that's changed today is global mobility. Today, global mobility is a thing. You can have a career in global mobility, helping people move around the world. Companies send people around the world to work in different places. Journalists work around the world. Academics move. Students move. Medical staff move to work in different countries very often. So things have really changed. Also today, the original idea of helping mothers and children stay together is no longer what it's used for. It's mostly used by fathers to force children to come back to the fathers. So you need to think about what would make a mother pick up her child or children and leave the home she's living in and go to another country. Very often her home country, so go back to her home country. Why would she do that? Domestic violence is not an acceptable defence at the moment, but it's one we're trying to get awareness of when it comes to how this law is actually used in real life. Because why do mothers pick up and leave? We all know if you're in a situation in which there is domestic violence, you're told just leave. If you're in a foreign country, where do you go? You want to go home, where you understand the systems, you understand the laws a little bit better, you know where to look for help. You've got family perhaps and friends who will support you. So these are all things which are really important and are not accepted or recognised very well under the terms of the Hague Convention. So I'd like to look at what is allowed under the terms of the Hague Convention. What are the permitted defences? It's a really strict law, and they define the defences that you could use. The first one is consent or acquiescence. That means that the parent who's saying, I want the children back, actually originally consented or acquiesced. Sounds good. But the problem with that is parent can consent, and this has happened to many of the mothers I've talked to, where the father says, yeah, go back to your home country, take the kids, I don't want you anymore, off you go. And then they change their minds. It's a cat and mouse game. You think you're safe, and you're not, because the father is allowed to change his mind. Another defence permitted is settlement. That means the child, and remember this is all about the children, the child is settled in the new country, the new jurisdiction. That is generally seen as taking at least 365 days. Not 364, 365. Again, thinking about the cat and mouse game that I just mentioned, a lot of fathers seem to leave it until the 11th hour, the 11th month, or 11 and a half months even, before they start a case, and it slips in just under the deadline. What else? No parental rights. If the parent who's asking for return of the child was not exercising their parental rights at the time, they don't have the right to ask for the child back. This is very uncommon, and it's very unusual and rare to be able to prove that the person didn't have parental rights. It would mean court judgments against them in that other country, and lots and lots and lots of proof. Another thing that can work is the child's own objections. Now think things like Gillick competence. The child has to be old enough and mature enough to understand what's happening, to understand what they're objecting to, and to voice those objections very, very clearly. A trap that many fall into is it has to be an objection and not a preference, and it has to be an objection to the jurisdiction, to the country. It's not enough to say, Dad scares me, Dad hits me, I don't want to go back to Dad. That's not okay. The objection has to be to the jurisdiction. So let's imagine you're talking about, for example, Spain. The child has to say, oh, the whole country of Spain, that really scares me because they speak Spanish and I don't, or I don't know. The child has to think up and come up with an objection to that country, which is really, really unusual. Finally, almost finally, we're looking at the grave risk of harm to the child. This is the most common defence that is used in Hague cases, because this, you would think, covers domestic violence, right? Grave risk of harm. The child is going to be hurt by seeing their mother abused, physically abused, mentally abused. But no, the harm has to be to the child. When I was going through my own case, I remember the CAFCAS officer who spent an hour with my children, so knew them really well. He told me very proudly that he had returned children to war zones. He was talking about somewhere in the Middle East. And he was very proud. He said, I've returned children to war zones because the war is not a specific threat against the child. There's no grave risk of harm to that specific child. So you can send them back. So winning this defence is very difficult and doesn't happen very often. Finally, there's also the human rights aspect. And this is another thing that we would like to be more widely recognised. Human rights are violated. The mother's and the children's human rights are violated. If you can prove in your Hague Convention case that the other jurisdiction is not safe, that they will not respect your human rights, you might win. But remember, the Hague Convention is all about all the countries agreeing that all the other countries all 102 other countries have a legal system that is just as good as their own. They're each paying respect to each other's jurisdictions and legal systems. So how can you say it's not safe, that they won't respect your human rights, when your country has said this country is perfectly safe and equally good to be in? So all of these are very, very difficult. I'd like to run through a little case study with you now to make you think about things. This is imaginary. It's just something I use when I'm running workshops. We run workshops to educate people on what the Hague Convention is about so that they will be forewarned and forearmed. So let's think about this one. I'm thinking about a gentleman called John. He's a production engineer. He's very successful. His company say, we'd really like to send you to Australia. We know you've got a family and children. We're going to give you this package. We're going to pay for flights home at least once a year, private healthcare. We're going to provide accommodation for you. There's a great house with a pool. We're going to pay for private education for your children. You choose the school, we'll pay for it. We're going to get a visa for your wife to live there as well. We could even help her find a job if she wants to work, but she won't need to work because we're obviously going to give you a really good pay package as well as pay for your accommodation and your flights and so on. So you don't really have to worry about much. You'll be able to save a fortune. Everyone will be happy. You'll be in the sunshine. Australia, what's not like? So the family move with the children. They're aged 9 and 11, nearly ready to go to secondary school for the eldest one, 9 years old, feeling quite grown up, sharing with friends and family. They're moving to Australia for a few years. How exciting. Down under. They get there. 6 months later, they realise they really don't like it. Maybe the children have got allergies. They don't like heat. Stacey doesn't like it. Maybe John's having an affair. They don't like the spiders. One of the kids is scared of koalas. I don't know. There's a whole host of reasons. They don't like it. They miss their family. They miss their grandparents. They want to go back to the school they knew. Everyone speaks with a funny accent. The kids are finding it difficult. They want to go home. Maybe John has been a little bit violent towards Stacey at times. They're not happy. They really want to leave. So they do. They go home. They get on a flight. Off they get back home. Because it's what you do when things are going wrong. It's what we're all told to do. So they're at home. What happens next? 5 weeks later. Remember, they're back in the UK. The UK is very proud of sending children back within 6 weeks. So just 5 weeks later, John immediately started a Hague Convention case, asked for the children to be returned to him in Australia. The children at 9-11 can fly on their own. They're on a plane back to Australia within 5 weeks. Stacey, unfortunately, can't go with them. They go back on their own. Stacey finds out, apart from the fact she doesn't have the money to pay for another flight, she just paid for 3 flights to get them home. She doesn't have the money to go back. She finds out that her visa is dependent on being with her husband. She doesn't actually have the right to work. They were going to look into getting a work visa, but it hasn't been done yet. So she can't afford to go. So she has to stay at home with her family. Yes, she's got support, but the children are gone back to their father. When is she going to see them again? She can't afford to go back to Australia. John's probably not going to send the kids back to the UK. He's going to say, Stacey, you tried to steal my children from me. I'm not going to send them back to see you. Those are the sort of stories we hear, unfortunately, all the time. So this is what our work is about. Knowing that you cannot simply go home with your child if a relationship goes wrong is a big step to preventing further cases, we believe. Personally, I look on it as the same as marriage and divorce in many ways. You know, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people didn't know a lot about divorce. It was a thing that wasn't really done. It wasn't really accepted very widely. Today, we know if you get married and it doesn't work out, divorce might be in your future. You hope not, of course, when you get married, but everyone knows what the word means. You would have some idea where to go, friends to talk to who've experienced it. Citizens Advice Bureau, look for lawyers, read about it on the government website, talk to family and friends. If you've got big assets, things that are important to you, you probably know that you can have a prenup to protect your assets. If things go wrong, you haven't lost all of your assets. I think the Hague Convention should be just as well known as the word divorce. So you know, if you are in another country with your child or children and things go wrong, you can't just go home with them. So at Hague Explained, we work with charities and non-profits around the world to educate them on what the Hague Convention is about. Mothers go to their local domestic violence charity asking for help, and the charities don't know what they're experiencing. In my own case, I was living in Buckinghamshire. I went to Women's Aid and said, "What do I do? Help." And they went, "Oh, we'll get you a place in a refuge, don't worry." I talked to the police, and the police said, "Right, we'll get you a residence order. That'll be fine. And we'll put Women's Aid in a refuge, we'll get you a residence order, no problem." Nope, it didn't help because the Hague Convention is an international law and that trumps every domestic law and instrument you can think of. So charities and non-profits need to understand they can't use the usual instruments and ideas that they would use at home to help women going through Hague Convention cases. We also aim to work with global corporations that send staff to work abroad. So I've done lots of workshops with universities. I guest lecture at UCL, for example. I'm working with the University of Southampton and the students there, law students, as well as staff. So we want people to know about this. If you know, you can tell others. We hope that we will help some families and stop them sliding into this dreadful situation. Right. Oops. All right. Any questions? Let me stop sharing for a
Yeah,
moment.
yes, there are questions. Um,
Yes.
the first one is, can a parent obtain any form of written consent to take a child abroad that would carry legal power if the other parent changes their mind?
Great question. And if you're lucky, yes, you can. If you're very fortunate and your partner agrees to go with you to a lawyer who's got international experience and sign a letter, a memorandum saying that they agree that you can go home. You can do this in advance. This is one of the things we recommend. Go to a lawyer, sign an agreement in advance that if anything goes wrong and you want to go home, you can. Just as with a prenup, it's not 100% watertight, but it signals intention. So it can help. It's a very good idea. It can help, yes.
Okay, great. Another question. How successful are women in challenging this? Are there some countries that are worse than others?
Oh, that's a really good question. How successful are women? Generally pretty unsuccessful. It's been nearly 10 years since I saw my own children after my own Hague Convention case back in 2014. And I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of mothers in the 10 years since then. I know of very few successes, unfortunately. And it's really depressing to talk to mothers because they say, "We win, don't we?" No, sadly, generally you don't. There are some good wins, which is great and very encouraging, but it's quite unlikely. As for countries, no, they're all as bad as each other. Sadly, I can't say that any one is any better than any others.
Okay. Um, how quickly did the misuse of the Hague Convention start happening after its introduction? Was it legal firms who picked up on it and advised fathers to use it?
Another very good point. Fathers seem to have a little playbook that they all go by. There are fathers' rights groups that are very active, obviously, in custody cases and divorces. they seem to share this information. There are many legal firms around the world who make an awful lot of money out of helping fathers use the Hague Convention to punish the mother, ensure they've got custody of the children. I would say it probably started around it was signed in October 1980, November 1980, probably started. Fathers realised they could use this if they had wives that went against them and did something they didn't want, tried to leave and take the children away with them. So it's a good question. Maybe that's another PhD topic actually to look at.
Um, is there anyone in a position of power that's trying to get this changed?
In a position of power, no. No, I don't think so. There are people who are trying to get this changed. As I mentioned earlier, I work closely with the Filia, and they have a Hague Mothers Legacy project, so it's going on for several years. We're working together to do training for different charitable organisations. They are involved with the Permanent Bureau of The Hague, who are now, thanks to the work that they've done and others, actually holding forums, annual forums on how to include domestic violence as a defence. So in the UK, we've got some great laws. The 2015 Serious Crime Act criminalised coercive and controlling behaviour, first in the world for that. The 2021 Domestic Abuse Act, was it 21 or 22? 20, I think. In which a child who's been living in a household in which there is domestic violence is themselves a victim, whether or not it's been violence towards them or they've actually been in the room, they are themselves a victim because they're in the household. So these laws are great. If we could get that recognised in Hague cases, we'd be on to a winner. Then mothers and children could be safe. Who's working towards it? Grassroots feminists, mothers like me, lots of us.
Okay. There's more questions. At what age can children change their minds and seek out their mothers after these legal decisions?
Yes, that's something that people think will happen. The Hague applies until a child is 16. So if your 16-year-old is taken to another country, you can't use Hague. If they're 15 and 3/4, you can use Hague. So everyone thinks that at 16, the children will look for their mother and come back. Unfortunately, in our experience, what happens is they are influenced, manipulated perhaps by the fathers, and repeatedly told that the mothers are wrong, evil, liars, criminals that try to steal these precious children from their father who loves them so much. All a father has to do is say, I want to be a good dad now. So in our experience, actually, the children don't usually come looking for their mothers.
Okay, that's very sad. What would be the changes needed that would preserve the right protections of the original intention of the Hague Convention?
I think opening up the defences a little bit more, being a bit more open to reality, and recognising that a lot of mothers are actually victim survivors of domestic abuse or domestic violence, and they don't leave their home with their child for no reason at all. No mother's going to pick up their child and say, quick, let's go home to grandma and leave the house we've got for no reason. There's always a good reason. And that if that was recognised, I think that would help a lot of families, a lot of mothers and children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody said, would a TV drama similar to the post office scandal help in raising awareness?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. There are some smaller videos that have been made. Actually, I'd be happy to share one with you later. I'll send the link out perhaps. If I send it to you, Vicky, you might be able to share it. I'll give you information at the end as well about how to reach out to me and contact me, because I'd be happy to share more information with everybody. If it was a series or a TV drama, that would be great. People have talked about that over the years, but nothing concrete has actually come to life. So yes, if anyone
That will
want
have
to
to be
get
the
involved
next
in.
project. Now you've finished your masters, you have to write a script.
Definitely happy to help with something like that if someone else is involved in it. Yes.
Okay. Um, that's the end of the questions. Do you want to go on to your case studies now?
Great. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Vicky. Um, right. Can you see my slide now about Sophie? Great. Thank you. Right, so I just wanted to say a little bit more about Sophie, and please, I have put a couple of links at the bottom for Women's Aid and Refuge if you need help and support, and I hope this is not traumatic for anyone who's watching, but please do seek out help and support wherever and whenever necessary. I don't want to further traumatize anybody, but I would like you to know a little bit about another impact of the Hague Convention. So I'm going to read you the words that Sophie said to me while I was interviewing her for my dissertation. I remember this is really a dear friend of mine, and it breaks my heart, but it's so important. Sophie said, "So I was raped this summer, and it was a brutal rape. But the police dismissed this case. And now I'm wondering if they looked me up in the system and saw that I kidnapped my kids. Maybe whatever crime is happening to me, I'm not going to be a credible witness because of what happened to me." So Sophie really believes that she's got the label of abductor on her file, on her history. Got it. Hague Abduction Convention. We are abductors. People conflate abduction and kidnapping, although they are different. But people hear abduction and think kidnap. Ah, you're a child kidnapper. You're a criminal. That's terrible. Kidnapping children. How awful. Sophie was dismissed by the police when she went to tell them about her rape, which was pretty horrific. And she really believes that it's because they looked her up and saw that she had been labelled child abductor. So they thought, she's a dreadful mother. She's a criminal anyway. We've got other people to worry about. We can't worry about her. And it's something that stays with the mothers throughout their lives. The rest of their lives, they will have that label on them. So what I tried to do with my dissertation was to look at what can actually help these mothers. If you meet a mother who's gone through a Hague Convention case and lost custody of her children, lost her life with her children, what could help? I found 5 things that have helped all of them in general. One of the most important things was a connection with mothers who understand. We get too many people, mothers, women, and fathers, saying, "Oh, no, you must misunderstand. That never happens. I've never heard of it. Can't be true." They look at you and go, what did you do wrong? You can just see it going through their heads. She must have done something terrible to lose her kids. That only happens to really, really, really bad mothers. What does she do? Does she drug them? What happened? So, connection with other mothers who understand is one of the most important things we can do to help mothers in this situation. Also, they all found it helpful to have support from family and friends. So other mothers, yes, and just having their family and their friends from years ago around them, believing them and wanting to support them. That means the world. We have too many who say, you're a bad mother, can't help you. Even family will look at you with different eyes. So having support is really important. A lot of mothers found religion or various spiritual outlets to be helpful to them. They might not have been particularly religious beforehand, but in that search for something to give meaning, to explain, and to try and promise a better tomorrow, religion is something that helps. or spirituality. Mental health support is also really, really important. Most of the mothers I've talked to do not access any mental health support, or at least not for a long time. And the reason for that is when you're going through a court case, they will dig up information about you. The father's legal team will ask for information. They will access they will access health records, for example. If you have looked for mental health support, therapy, that will be used against you. You're obviously unstable because you're getting therapy. You went to see a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist maybe. Obviously an unstable mother. But we need it. We need that help and support. So that is something that has helped a lot of mothers. Awareness raising. Bless them. All of the mothers did this research with me because they want people to know what happened to them. To that end, if anyone wants to read my dissertation and read more about the 6 mothers, I'd be very happy to share it with you. Just get in touch and ask. Hoping to publish it academically, some of it as well, with the help of a professor at UCL. But all the mothers think that raising awareness will help other mothers not fall into the trap that they were in. So together with other mothers and their families, all of the mothers in my research actually held on to and shared with each other hope. One of the questions just now was about when will the children come back? Will they come back? At what age? Everyone hopes that their children will come back. It's a really strong hope. It keeps them going. It really is what you need to keep you going. Even when you get to the point that I've got to, where my children are now young adults, their childhoods have gone. But I believe one day they'll be back. So hope is another thing that's really important. We've got a couple of minutes now still, unless there are lots more questions. Vicky, would you like to go through more questions, or should I go through some case studies?
Go through some case studies.
Great. Okay. So I'd like to tell you about some of the other mothers in my research. There were 6 in total. I've told you about Sophie, one of the Scandinavian mothers. There are actually 2 Scandinavian mothers. So having told you about Sophie, I'd like to also tell you a little bit about Alia, Zoe, Isabel, Petra, and Charlotte. I'll stop sharing for a moment because I'd like to just tell you their stories without having slides. I'll read you the biographies that I used in my dissertation, which gives you a very, very brief summary of each case. So first, Alia. Alia met and married a man abroad. They agreed to move back to her home country, with their children for the better opportunities they believed it offered. Then, after a while, her husband took the children back to his country and refused to return them. She attempted unsuccessfully to use the Hague Convention herself, then went to the country her children were in and attempted to rescue them. Use of the Hague Convention, together with institutional abuse, as Alia tried to secure sole custody, meant that her children still remain with their father. She's now back in her country, but fears incarceration or sectioning on mental health grounds should she ever try to see her children again. Let me tell you about Zoe. Zoe got married and had children with a man from a different continent, so a long way away. They lived in his country. She was abused very violently. On fleeing abuse and returning to her home country, he used the Hague Convention to have the children returned to him. She's now not seen her young children for many years. She even travelled once to the country they're in to try and see them, but she wasn't able to see them. She now fears arrest if she were to attempt to return to that country again. Incarceration and worse is what her ex-husband continues to threaten her with. She's had periods of occasional video contact with her children when she's forced to communicate with them in a foreign language. They no longer speak or understand their mother tongue. Let's move on to Isabel. Isabel and her baby lived in her home country, occasionally visited the baby's father, who lived in a neighbouring country, so it wasn't a long journey. They visited and stayed a while, then went back home. Visited, stayed for a while, went back home. Visited, stayed for a while, went back home. And he said, "Hey, you've taken my child." He demanded that she return his child to the country that he was living in. And the police in her home country arrested her. They removed her child, who was sent immediately to the father. She was incarcerated for a short period by the police before being allowed home. This was a few years ago. She's still on bail. She was on bail for over a year. She has now moved to the country that her ex is in, the child's father, where her child is forced to remain. She's largely dependent on the kindness of friends. She has occasional supervised visitation with her child, but she believes that his educational and medical needs are not being fully met. She has grave concerns for him. Petra. Petra moved to a different continent as well, where she got married and had a child. When she finally escaped the abusive relationship she was in and moved back to her home country, do you see a pattern here? Her husband used the Hague Convention to have their child returned to him. Petra now has only video contact with her young child. She struggles almost daily. She does have daily contact, but she struggles to ensure that she's awake for the call. It's a different continent and it's set at a time that is most convenient for the father, with no thought for the time it is for her. She also hopes that the tech functions, that her Wi-Fi is going to work as it should, because she knows that if she's late, she will not be permitted extra time, not even an extra minute. She dreams of the day her child will return to her, hoping that she'll still be able to share some of her only child's childhood. And finally, Charlotte. Charlotte and her children were living in her home country. So the whole family were in their home country. She tried to escape her abusive ex, who was colluding with what she sees as an abusive system, trying to place her children into foster care. She did this by seeking refuge on another continent. She ran away with her children. After they'd been in this other country, on this other continent, for over a year, the father used the Hague Convention to force their return. You might remember what I said about a settlement being 365 days. Even after that, it's judge's discretion. With all of the defences, it's the judge's discretion whether to send the child back or not. So Charlotte's ex used the Hague Convention. She'd been in another country with her children happily for over a year, but they were sent back to her ex. On arrival, her children were removed from her. She was prosecuted and she was incarcerated. She was in prison for over 12 months because she'd run away to try and keep her children safe. After being paroled, Charlotte led a hand-to-mouth existence, dealing with incessant court hearings, lawfare, using the courts as a further means to keep abusing the mother, and only sporadic visitation with her two children. Charlotte finally felt that her only option was to leave her home country because she felt she was treated as an enemy of the state. So she left and moved to a country she felt safe in. All of these stories, I've got details about all of them in my dissertation, which I said I'd be happy to share with you. If you want to know more about my own story, it's quite public. It's very similar to theirs. As I said, I haven't seen my children for almost 10 years now. They are now both young adults, aged 18 and 19. So you can just Google me, Anita Gera. You'll find some of the articles that have been written. I've also been on TV and written for charities and so on. And some questions to leave you with. I'd like to just share a screen with you again. Can you see the questions, more information slide now? Yeah, great, thank you. Right, something I'd like to leave you with. One of the things that we feel is really important and very easy is to stop talking about it as the Hague Abduction Convention. Remember what I told you about Sophie? She really felt that that label of abduction has followed her. The police don't want to work with her because she's a child abductor. So why would they help her, even if she's been raped? I've heard the same from other mothers. And in my own case, I recently, last year, had to go back to family court in the United States where my children are. I was labelled child abductor. It's a criminal offence in the United States. So I had to fight really hard to not be seen as a criminal. So one of the most important things we'd like to do is stop people talking about it as an abduction convention. And please don't ever conflate abduction and kidnapping. Abduction is generally within a family, taking children without permission or taking a person without permission. Kidnapping usually involves threats and violence and taking someone who is not related to you to a place they don't want to be in. And it often includes things like ransoms. And it's definitely a crime in every country. I will send these slides to Vicky as well so that she might be able to share them with everybody. Please do connect with us or follow us on LinkedIn. Hague Explained, we've got a company page on LinkedIn and of course my personal page. Follow us on Twitter or X. We're at Hague Explained and I use my real name, Anita S. Gera. Our website is there. It's also quite simple to find. There is a QR code if you can see that. We are hague-explained.org. And our email is simply info@hague-explained.org. Right, I'll stop sharing now. I'd like to thank you very much for listening to what I've had to tell you today. And if there are any other questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Anita, for sharing that with us and sharing parts of your story as well. It's really distressing to hear, and it's I think a lot of people in the chat are saying people had no idea that these kind of things could happen.
Awareness raising is really important. People move abroad happily, don't they? We all think, oh, what fun, we'll go and live in another country for a bit. Students move, people move because of their job, and they don't know. So anyone who's in an international family, which means you or your partner have citizenship of another country, you've lived in another country, you are living in another country, you have a family member in another country, that makes you an international family, which means the Hague Convention can affect you. And it doesn't just affect the mother and children. Think about the grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, the wider maternal family, perhaps close family friends. It could be your colleague at work. So your team member, your valuable team member, might be suddenly in international litigation and you would lose them because they're involved in that. It could really affect anybody. So knowing about it and talking about it, tell people, please. Tell your hairdresser, they can tell others. Tell your neighbours, tell your children, they can tell others. Everybody. I think that's really one of the most important things right now. And I am working with Filia Hague Mothers. They're doing amazing work. If you know any organisations who would like to have a workshop, a bit like we did just now, we would try and make it more interactive to do case studies that you can actually work on and work out solutions to with breakout rooms and so on, then please do share the information about Hague Explained, because we want to do what it says on the tin, which is explain what the Hague Convention is.
That's great, Anita. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us this evening. As I said, it's been really sobering to hear, and thank you so much for sharing your story and the stories of those other women. And I think we'd be really interested to see any articles that come out in the future around your dissertation. So thank you very much. Thank you.